Welcome to video lesson context clues lesson number 1. If you chose context clues as your topic and you're just starting, you are in the right lesson. This is lesson number 1. All right, let's go ahead and start by taking notes on context clues. It says, introducing context clues. When you use context clues, you find the meaning, go ahead and write that in, of an unfamiliar word by looking at the words, phrases, or sentences around it. Let's go ahead and write in around it. Make sure you put a period. You can use these tips, let's write in tips, to find a word's meaning from the context clues. Look for the meaning of the new word in the words before and after it. Let's write in after. The word's meaning may also appear in another sentence. So don't forget to check before and after the sentence. You can also find tips use familiar words. Let's write in familiar. In other parts of the passage to figure out the topic. Another way you can find context clues, the word's meaning with context clues, is then use other clues in the passage to help you figure out the unfamiliar word. All right, let's complete the think about it. It says, read the paragraph below. Look for context clues to help you figure out the meaning of matted. He said that shearing was good for sheep. Sheep don't shed, he explained. Without shearing, their wool gets too long. It gets matted, tangled, and dirty, and they get overheated in summer. Number 1, according to the passage, what gets matted? Okay, so what gets matted? What are they talking about when they say it gets matted? What are they talking about? Let's look at the sentence before. Without shearing, their wool gets too long. Okay, so we're talking about sheep's wool. So let's go ahead and write that down. Sheep's wool. Wool is kind of like their hair. Okay. Number 2, what context clues help explain the meaning of matted? Let's look for some context clues. So before it says, without shearing, their wool gets matted, or their wool gets too long. It gets matted, tangled and dirty, and they get overheated in summer. Okay, so I see this clue, long, right? Without shearing, their wool gets too long. That's like when your hair grows really long. And then it says it gets matted, and it gives us some clues to what matted means. It says tangled and dirty. Okay, so those are our context clues. I'm going to write those 3 words down. Long, tangled, and dirty. You should have those written down. Let's move on to number 3. Based on the context clues, what does matted mean? Okay, so long, tangled, dirty. Those are our context clues. What does all of that stuff mean? It gets matted, tangled, and dirty. To me, that means that it is clumped, right? Clumped together. The hair clumps together with dirt, and it's long and it's tangled. So I'm going to say the definition is clumped together. Let's look at use a strategy. It says ask questions. So our strategy is asking questions. Asking questions can help you understand what you read. Let's write in understand. Sorry. Before you read a passage, read the title. Look at any pictures. What questions do you have about the passage? Okay, go ahead and write down questions. As you read, look for answers to your questions. Then continue to ask new questions as you read. Once you have all of those closed notes written down, you are ready to turn the page. Go ahead and flip over to the back. And it says, use what you learned. We're going to read the passage, use the notes from on the front side to help you. Then answer the questions on the next page. Okay, so we're going to read this passage and then use the notes to help us answer the questions. Okay, so I'm going to look over here at my sidebar first because I like to look at my structural features. I see a picture down here that looks like a type of animal, maybe a goat or a sheep. Since we're talking about sheep, it's probably a sheep. So let me look at over here. It says ask questions. Look at the title, the picture, think about questions you have about the passage. Okay, so I'm going to look at that picture. The title is called Sheep Shearing Saturday. So let's see, what questions do I have? I wonder if sheep are sheared on Saturdays. Well, I'm going to look for that as I read. It also says over here on the side, context clues. Look at the words around fleece to find its meaning. Okay, so we want to look for the meaning of the word fleece. I'm going to keep that in mind as I read. And the last one says ask questions. See if you found answers to your questions. Then ask yourself another question. Okay, so as I read, if I find the answer to my question, I can always ask myself more questions. Let's go ahead and read. Sheep Shearing Saturday. Why do you want to see someone shaving sheep? I asked Marco. It sounds boring. It's called shearing, he said. It's how we get wool. There's an exhibition Saturday that demonstrates how it's done. It will be interesting. Okay, so Saturday isn't the day that they shear sheep, but there isn't going to be an exposition, which I see is underlined, so I probably need to figure out what that word means. Let's keep reading. So Saturday, we traveled to the sheep farm. I was surprised that so many people were there. First, the shearer, Farmer Wilson, flipped an ewe on her back. He said, in this position, she can't fight you. You can shear faster without hurting her or yourself. Using electric clippers, he first removed the belly wool. Then he sheared the fleece, the wool used for making cloth. Keeping the fleece all in one piece, first he clipped the back legs, then the front legs and head, and finally the sides and back. He said that shearing was good for sheep. Sheep don't shed, he explained. Without shearing, their wool gets too long. It gets matted, tangled, and dirty, and they get overheated in summer. Marco was right. Watching sheep shearing was fascinating. Now I have a new appreciation for wool. I won't complain about Marco's ideas again. Okay, so I know that on the side it said to look at the words around fleece to find its meaning. So I'm going to come back here and find my underlined word fleece, and I'm going to look at words around it. It says, he said, then he sheared the fleece. So sheared, I already learned, is when you use electrical tool clippers to remove the wool. The wool is the hair. So that's kind of like getting a haircut. So sheared is kind of like when you get a haircut, you use electric clippers to shave your head. So sheared is similar to shaved. So sheared the fleece, and then it said the wool used for making cloth. So I see that this context clue is kind of a definition context clue, and it tells us that fleece is the wool used for making cloth. Okay, so that's the hair from the sheep that we use to make cloth. All right, let's go ahead and turn to our next page, which has the questions that we're going to answer. I'm going to keep my story right next to me so that I can look back to it to help me answer the questions. All right, so first we have an example. It says, choose the correct answer. Use the steps at the right to help you answer the question. What is the best definition of ewe? A, shearer. B, sheep farm. C, female sheep. D, electric clippers. Step by step. Number 1, figure out the topic. I look at the picture and the title and read the first few paragraphs. I see that the passage is about sheep shearing. 2, look for context clues. I see that the shearer talks about shearing the ewe, so I think that an ewe is a sheep. 3, look for any other clues to the meaning. The passage says the shearer flipped an ewe on her back. The word her tells me that an ewe is female. Okay, so now we know that the best definition of ewe is C, a female sheep. Let's move on so that we can start answering our questions. It says, let's read the directions first. Now read each question. Circle the letter of the best answer. 1. What word from the passage means almost the same as shearing? Go ahead and take a minute and try to decide which word from the passage means almost the same as shearing. We might want to go back to the story to use our context clues and find that word shearing. I see that I already underlined it here, and the sentence before that says, using electrical clippers, he first removed the belly wool. Then he sheared the fleece, which is the wool used for making cloth. Okay, so that tells me, I remember from before, it's kind of like getting a haircut. And when I get a haircut, it's called shaving. So I'm going to circle shaving because that's the closest. 2, based on the passage, an exhibition is probably A, trip, B, show, C, job on a farm, or D, kind of animal. Let's go back to our passage and look for that sentence. I see it underlined there. It says, there's an exhibition Saturday. Okay, so it's an event that's happening on Saturday that demonstrates how it's done. So it will be interesting. So it's something that's going to demonstrate how to shear a sheep. Let's look at our options again. A trip. Does a trip demonstrate something to you? No. Does a show demonstrate something to you? Well, a show would show you how to do something maybe. So I'm going to think it could be that one. Let me check the other ones out. Let's see. C, a job on a farm. Well, it doesn't say anything about it being a job, so I'm going to cross that off. Kind of animal? Nope. An animal isn't a demonstration, so I'm going to cross that off. I was right. It is B, show. Go ahead and circle that one. Let's look at number 3. What context clue helps you figure out the meaning of fleece? Well, we already did that one, actually. So we know that fleece, by the definition, is wool used for making cloth. D. Let's go ahead and circle that. 4. Someone who is appreciative probably is A, friendly, B, interesting, C, in a good mood, or D, does not complain. Let's look back at our sentence to find appreciative. It says, I have a new appreciation for wool. I won't complain about Marco's ideas again. Well, I see this word complain. I won't complain. Let's look at our options again. Does not complain is option D. That's my answer right there. Okay, you are now ready to move on to lesson number 2. So first, make sure you get out your tracker. This is context clues, lesson number 1. Make sure you check that off. And I see that the very next part of my lesson cycle is lesson 2 for context clues. Go ahead and stop and go get that lesson now.